Story tonight about something that happened in this city 70 years ago. Wasn't the first time it happened, but it was one of the worst. They called it Black Tuesday because that was pretty much the color of the sky all day long and of the air that people were breathing. Funny thing is, a lot of people thought they'd been dealing with the city's smoke problem. But that day it became obvious they hadn't been doing nearly enough. The sun did come up on the morning of November 28, 1939. You just had to look really hard to find it. This is the Civil Courts building at midday. The story of St. Louis and its smoke problem is not just how it got to be this bad, but how it eventually got better. It's a story Tim ONeil was working on for one of his Sunday edition history pieces in the Post-Dispatch.
Sometimes I get a couple, 3 weeks ahead, and sometimes I'm...
He doesn't have to go very far to research a story like this, just to the back of the newsroom and into the morgue, the newspaper archives. Now, some weeks he's not exactly sure what he'll be writing about, but he knew what the topic would be for the last Sunday in November.
This is an easy one. I remember my folks telling me about Black Tuesday. And so and this was a picture of Black Tuesday.
Wow.
This is what it looked like. If you can find it, the cathedral on Lindell is right in the middle of this. But the story on the first day, St. Louisans coughed and complained this morning as one of the season's worst smoke clouds enveloped most of the city and drifted slowly into the suburbs. See, as you can tell, we did a lot of writing about soft coal smoke.
Yeah, this was a huge issue, I think.
It was a major issue.
Yeah.
The Post-Dispatch got a Pulitzer for it, for just writing every day on this issue.
Yeah.
I mean, it was they call it the public service, so it wasn't a big investigation. It was just thorough coverage.
His problem is not finding enough information, but writing just one article about something that had been plaguing the city of St. Louis and its residents for generations. The smokestack was once a proud symbol of a prosperous city, but it wasn't just factories that made smoke. Just about every building and every home was heated by coal. And when the weather got cold and the furnaces fired up, the air in St. Louis could get just plain dirty.
And in those days we were very used to every chimney belching black smoke. That was not unusual for us. And every day when we arrived at school, we had to get some kind of tissue or a handkerchief and clean the nostrils because we were dirty. And everybody was.
Marie Long grew up in North St. Louis. This is her with some friends in 1939 in front of a store at Page and Academy.
It's a wonder that everybody didn't die of something of their lungs when I think about it now, because everybody was breathing this all the time.
People with emphysema, bad enough, didn't live through these things if they were bad enough. Somewhere in here I read about pathology reports and autopsies back then would routinely find damage to St. Louis lungs from coal smoke. So it was almost like a black lung just by living in the city.
The thing is, everybody knew what the problem was. America was fueled and heated by coal. But in St. Louis, most of that coal came from southern Illinois, and it was soft coal, which just didn't burn very clean. That's what made St. Louis's air worse than other cities. In 1934, Mayor Bernard Dickmann decided to tackle the issue, and he appointed his secretary, Washington University engineering professor Raymond Tucker, as the city's smoke commissioner. Under this new anti-smoke campaign, St. Louis began to require Illinois coal go through a washing process to remove some of the impurities before it got to St. Louis furnaces. It also began to require mechanical stokers for big furnaces. This would feed the coal at a controlled rate for more efficient and cleaner burning. But all of this cost money, and this was the Depression. There was political and business opposition, and the people, well, the people wanted the cheapest coal they could find. Raymond Tucker knew the most effective step would be to ban the use of soft coal, but the Board of Aldermen just wasn't going to go that far. And then came November 28th, 1939.
Well, here's my favorite quote from this story. A Webster Groves commuter said to his fellow travelers on a streetcar, "Let me off at 13th and Washington if you can find it." That's what he said to the motorman on the streetcar. Tucker finally said, "Mayor, the only solution here is hard coal. We can't fix Illinois high sulfur dirty coal." And so that's when the Dickmann and the political forces and the civic forces finally said, "Okay, that's how we have to do it." And they instituted the ban on soft coal.
And the air did get better, and St. Louis became a national model for its anti-smoke efforts.
Other newspapers started coming to St. Louis to write stories about the St. Louis miracle, so to speak.
The Post-Dispatch got its Pulitzer Prize for its coverage of the problem, and Bernard Dickmann was defeated in the next city election. But Raymond Tucker would be elected mayor in 1953 and served for 3 terms. He was mayor during urban renewal, highway building, and the construction of the Gateway Arch. In his honor, 12th Street would be renamed Tucker Boulevard, which looked like this 70 years ago.